is kind of new to me, right?
Common name, yeah. We had actually a list of 10 names. I listened to 10. We have about 2 years. And I had 10 names. Rachel was one of the 10. My wife had one name. So it wasn't much simpler. And so we ended up with Isabel. Well, stick around. Well, you know what? We all know that's got to I've happily showed up in all these events there. Yeah. Now, this is going to be a bit of a problem for the video people because I don't like to stand still. This is something my mother actually noted before I was born. My dad could see the little legs moving, and my mom said they never stopped for when they started somewhere about, I don't know, 5-6 months in. So I have a hard time standing still. I need to burn off some energy. And I drove in today from Edmonton. I had a great series of 3 meetings up there, and glad to come down here. You know, Edmonton, they don't do the weather as well as they do it here in Calgary. And I've known that for years. I actually, when I was about this high, we moved to Calgary in 1978. And we went back to Saskatchewan in 1984. So about a third of my childhood was spent in the city here. Now, it affected me in some ways. It affected my older brother in other ways. And I can let you decide if it was good or bad. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Calgary Stampeders fan, to this day. I, meanwhile, cheer for those evil people in green. However, I'm told about a third of Calgarians do anyway, so it's not quite such an unpopular problem here. So anyways, it's good to be back in Calgary. I've been here for a couple of events, for fundraising, for other stuff. And it's a strange leadership race in that the rules sort of encourage people to go campaign in Quebec and Atlantic Canada and to stay away from Alberta until the end of the campaign. And I can explain later on why the rules actually encourage that because of membership sales, values and ridings and so forth. But when you're from Saskatchewan, you're so natural to just zip over into Calgary. I've got a brother in Lethbridge I've seen tomorrow as a campaign. So it has seemed strange to spend more of the last few months in Quebec and Halifax and St. John's than in Calgary and Edmonton. But I'm really glad to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a member of Parliament for the Saskatoon area since 2004. First elected when the parties all got united, we founded, however you want to say it, and we got together to go down to Paul Martin. We didn't quite do it in 2004, but I remember that night in 2006, January of 2006, where we actually broke through something that 2 years earlier had seemed to be impossible and defeated the Liberals. Now, I also remember our night of election for that strong, stable national majority government in 2011. And I also remember thinking, you know, I never thought I'd live in a country again where Trudeau was Prime Minister. Because if you remember, 78 to 84 had some bad economic years for Canada, particularly Calgary. And some of those things had to do with the previous Mr. Trudeau. So when memories die hard, even for people who were 6, 7, 8 years old at the time. But I'm glad to be here. But I have to say, you know, if you had asked me 12 months ago, even though I've been a long-time Conservative member of Parliament, if I would be running for the Conservative Party leadership, I probably would have told you, no, not going to do it. Not ever. I had a couple of people actually approach me in April. It's funny, when you're one of the few MPs in the caucus that speaks passable French, people automatically think you're leadership material. I don't know if that quite qualifies, but that's the way this country kind of is. They sort of narrow down the list. And I had told him, nope, I know how much work it is, I know the hours away from home, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to go there. But then last year at our party's convention in Vancouver, I started to begin to think about changing my mind. And I did it for one basic reason. And some of you may disagree with this, but that's fine. This explains where I started to get to where I am today. Our party had a resolution there about getting rid of the traditional definition of marriage. Some people were saying, you know, we're not going to vote on it again, let's get rid of it. But this is one thing which wasn't told to a lot of people at the convention. In most of the places across the country where the resolution had been voted on by party members, it had been defeated. It went down 60% opposed, 40% in favor. In the online poll that had been done, it got defeated in Saskatchewan, it got beat in conventions in all over places, particularly in Ontario. Ontario is much more socially conservative than people realize. And so there had to be a little bit of bending of the rules to get it on there. And we had a debate on the issue, and I frankly, for people who have never agreed with me on this issue, I totally respect them. I like consistency. If you've always been consistency on this issue, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Let's debate it. But the problem for me there, and what began to get me to think about why maybe I should get involved in running for the leadership, was watching some of my very good friends, people who still are, flip-flop on the issue literally overnight. Because in politics, you very quickly realize there's two types of politicians. There's people who are like compasses. They have a direction that they're pointed. They're going in that direction, whatever it is. They've got principles. It's a lodestar. They're going that way. And you know what? I respect people like that, even though I disagree with them. And you know, there are some of the other candidates in the race. I will never support Michael Chong's carbon tax, ever, 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 ever. But the guy has consistently argued it. He believes it. He has believed it for years. I think he's 100% wrong in so many ways, but he's honest, he's sincere about it. I respect him for it. Okay? He will never, ever. Michael's the most honest guy I've ever met. He's never going to lie to you. And that's one of the problems he always has in politics. He tells the truth even when he's wrong. Okay? Great guy. But I respect him for it. And there's other guys in the race that are like that too. But I really have a problem with the other type of politician. Almost every member of the Liberal Party fits into this category. They're weather vanes. The wind blows one way, they're like this. The wind blows the other way, they're like that. Look, one thing you learn very quickly when you go door knocking as a rookie candidate member of Parliament, people don't actually have opinions on a lot of issues. People who buy political memberships do, people who are involved in politics do, but the average Canadian voter doesn't think about all the issues. What they want from you as a leader is someone who stands for something, who's willing to express an opinion, and who has a reason for why this is best for the country. And you know, people get frustrated. Granted, they vote for the Liberals all the time. You see this more in Ontario than out here. And the weather vane type of politician is very popular. And again, some of my friends unfortunately began to fall into that category. And so some of the people who had approached me before began to approach me again, and they said, you have been consistent. When you believe in something, you argue for it. You respect people who disagree. When you lose a debate, you can move on. But you stand for something and you're consistent. You should run, and you should get in there to stand for the consistent principles that the party has held for the last 10, 12, was it now 13 years since we've been one unified party. Because those are the things that actually got us elected. Some of you may remember back in 2005, right before we went in the election which brought down the Liberals, Stephen Harper gave a speech in Ottawa to a conservative think tank. And he didn't back down from his principles. He doubled down on them. We won that election. 2015, when we're out door knocking, having to answer questions about a certain Senator Duffy for 2 weeks of the campaign, we lost. And this is one thing I will never understand. Why good, solid conservatives will ever walk away from their principles. Principles matter. That's what leadership is about. Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, many people have taught us that in the past, and we keep forgetting that lesson. So what are the sort of principles, what is the general philosophy that a Brad Trost brings? Where is he? What does he stand for? Where is he going to go? Well, I put my broad philosophy, I organize it into 3 basic categories, all of which I believe are interlinked. They come one to another. They're there to support one another. And I talk about this, and first of all, people understand where I come from. This is sometimes the only thing people think I am, but they know I'm socially conservative. And they understand that I actually put the value of family underneath everything that we do. Because family is the fundamental building block of society. You don't see that when the Liberals go out there arguing for something. Look, one of the reasons I'm opposing the legalization of marijuana is because it will very much make it more difficult for parents to control the substance to get it to their children. It destroys the family when you have drug addictions in your society. One of the reasons I've been so adamant in supporting the traditional definition of the family is because we need to promote mums and dads as something better than any other arrangement, 2 people, he's and she's, committed to each other in lifelong union. That's how we actually build our society. It's something that has not only social value, it has economic value. You go out there and you go to certain portions of North America, the rural reserves in Western Canada, the inner cities of the United States, and you see where the family has broken down. It is an absolute chaos to the economy of it. So you don't have to be a church-going, sort of Bible-thumping person to understand just what this has meant. Every culture throughout the whole world has understood that this is fundamental to society. And I realize that we may not be able to get certain legislation through, but we should stand for certain principles, because as we draw a line in the sand, they help us to deal with issues that go forward. So I'm a social conservative, one that actually believes this can bring people into the party. The old line about you get more with honey than vinegar is true. So when I talk about my pro-life convictions, I am adamant about them. I say let's do things like make Canada the most pro-adoption country in the world. It's a great thing to do. Let's go there and educate our fellow Canadian citizens on the value of Down syndrome children. Their parents are often told, go ahead, abort, this child is not worth something. I was talking about this in one of my campaign things about why things like that matter. And I met a mother who said to me, my little boy has Down syndrome, not enough Canadians value. And when we get out there and we put that in our conservative message, people actually understand we're compassionate conservatives, we care about things. If we're going to fight things like euthanasia, let's talk about how we can expand palliative care for our elderly, which is a disgrace in this country. But I'm not only a social conservative. People, when they know me, that's the first thing they think about. I'm also an unapologetic, unrelenting fiscal conservative. Because you have to remember, a government that's big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything away. This is something that needs to be understood. Nothing is free when you get it from the government. You pay for it, and you often pay for it in more ways than you know how. So we have to actually be disciplined and eliminate things from the government expenditure that are not necessary. We spend $1 billion a year on the CBC every year, and they spend their time mostly attacking conservatives. Big C conservatives, small C conservatives, they don't really care. And what I don't get is in this whole leadership campaign, only one of the other candidates is with me on scrapping them. And we know the majority of rank and file, card-carrying conservatives in this country really don't like their tax dollars going to them. The CBC will exist as a private entity. It will have what it has. But we as fiscal conservatives need to get serious about cutting things out like that we don't need, because it costs the taxpayers money. There's billions of dollars. I'm not a big fan of corporate subsidies. They need to go. I think there's things that we need to do and look at expenditures. Again, you want to ask a social conservative where to cut? $650 million of overseas abortion funding. You want to talk to someone here in Alberta who's lost their job in the oil and gas because of the extra pressure of carbon taxes? You ask them, do you think $2.5 billion of your tax dollars should go for overseas climate change programs? The answer is no. So, we need to cut income taxes so that every single Canadian can have a tax cut. Because this is one thing that needs to be understood. Tax cuts aren't just for the rich, they're for all Canadians because we all pay one way or the other. We don't need a carbon tax in any way, shape, or form. Okay? As I was mentioning earlier, I was a little kid in Calgary when the last Trudeau brought in the National Energy Program. We don't need to shut down Western Canada, which pays for the bills in this country for many years. And that's what this whole idea is. Last time the NEP was to put a thumb on the West, the carbon tax is the exact same thing. No ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. That means I am opposed to all this regulation to the back doors, to anything like that. That just hurts our economy. So as a fiscal conservative, we need to eliminate things because not only does it bring extra freedom and prosperity, the two go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. You look at our society, Canada is one of the oldest democratic countries in the world. Why have we been successful? Because we've been one of the freest countries in the world. That's also why we've been one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And finally, I'm a democratic conservative. I do understand, as much as I hold to all of the views I have, very emphatically, I cannot get every member of the Conservative Party and every Canadian on side with me on everything. So I have to allow some flexibility, but I'm going to try to win you over. If you disagree with me, I'm going to do things to try to convince you. I'm going to show different ways, and we're going to bring this over. In the Conservative Party, you tended to have gotten asked for one thing over and over again if you've been a long-term member. Money. Not your opinion, not your vote, but for donations. And if we're a party that's supposed to be democratic and representative and understand where our membership is, we need to have internal referendums, internal plebiscites, if you were, to have views on things. I'll give an example fairly recently. Some of you have heard of this M103 motion, the Islamophobia motion. All but two Conservative MPs who were in the House that day voted against it. Okay, there's just two of them. What you don't know is it took a little bit of nudging on certain elements of our leadership. Not our critic, he was great on this, but some of our leadership was really scared to be politically incorrect on this. Our membership had no such doubts. Our membership knew something when they saw it. They called a spade, and they had no doubt. We talked to the party memberships throughout the country. Everyone said, yeah, this is one of those scams being done by those groups that are sort of sympathetic to the Islamic Brotherhood, and they're going ahead with it. You guys should oppose it. But again, when you get to Ottawa and you live in the bubble, you kind of want to be on both sides of the fence. So it took a little while to get everyone on side and realize that we as a party should fight it. And that's one of the things that I've always found most amazing. When you actually go back and forth and have regular communication with the members for more than just money, you get more and you get ahead. Candidate selection, a lot of other things across the country, strategy, it was all coming from Ottawa, and that caused problems for us as a party. English language is something interesting. Our Prime Minister is a minister, someone to serve. You know, under the English Westminster system, we talk about first among equals. France today had an election. They're having a president. Other countries have different titles. We don't have a first dictator. We don't have a first president. We have a first minister, a prime minister. Because under the Westminster style of government, it's supposed to be first among equals. The government is the cabinet supported by the governing party, and they go back and forth in a relationship. That's how it works best. And an understanding that if you're going to get your goals, you don't get them by force. You get them by bringing people alongside. And those are sort of the intertwined principles that I believe are necessary. If I'm going to be successful as a social conservative, I need to convince people that I'm right. If I'm going to be successful as a fiscal conservative, I need to be able to convince people I'm right. Why? Because it all goes back to those basic democratic principles. The rule of law, representative, and responsible government. The things that Canada was built on. So those are my basic principles. You're all going to have all sorts of questions about specific policies. What does he think on taxes, immigration, you name it. You're going to have questions, feel free to ask about anything whatsoever. Biography. There's the joke in this race, I'm the Asian candidate in the race. It doesn't look that way, but why are people saying that? And people ask, what are appropriate questions to ask at events like this? Well, I had the same experience when I was in front of a grade 5 class in my Saskatoon riding. The teacher had gotten everyone all ready, all the little grade 5ers, and they were supposed to all know and ask what appropriate questions. They'd been studying social studies, they knew what the premier was, they knew what the mayor was, now they were reading their member of parliament. So they shoot up their little hands, there was a little boy on the front row, and I pointed to him. And his important question was, Mister, what's your salary? Poor teacher, her face turns totally red, and she tries to give a little explanation, they know better and all that. So all of her little charges, they listen, they all nod their head, yes, we know what questions, it has to be related to what we